Yes, welcome in. The Badgers are streaking. 4 straight wins for Wisconsin. 2 since the last time we had a chance to talk, Jesse, and 2 impressive ones. I will say that. You put up 116 points against Iowa. I know it's Iowa's defense. I know it's a Fran McCaffery who apparently has no interest in coaching basketball ever anymore at all. Even though he does. Oh, don't give me that look. Don't give me that look. They had zero interest in playing defense on Friday night. We'll get
That's only half the game. Just because Iowa couldn't stop a nosebleed doesn't mean he has no interest in coaching basketball.
Do you know he has a book called Building a Championship Defense?
That is news to me. Should we get it? And then we can gift it to each other and then give a book review.
And I can put it in the back here instead of his Frantrum thing because Frantrum doesn't exist anymore. Like, if Wisconsin had put up 116 points on them back in 2014, he would have lost it and gotten like 8 technical fouls. He doesn't care. We'll get into it. It's fine. Their defense has never been very good, but it felt like they weren't even trying on Friday night. We'll get into it. But then that was an impressive win because of 116 points, the way that they did it. I mean, put up 116 points, give up, 85 and still win by 30 plus. That doesn't happen at Wisconsin. And then they go on the road on Monday night and get a win at Rutgers, a Rutgers team that has played horribly away from home, but very good at home. I mean, they were 7-0 at home going into last night, and Wisconsin gets a win. So we're going to talk about both of those, and then we'll get into some of the listener questions that I got after the game on Monday night. Before we do, again, Home Field Apparel is the official apparel sponsor of the camp. They have better vintage gear than any other place out there, and it's just not just Wisconsin. It's nearly every college in the country. Go check them out, homefieldapparel.com. Use promo code Bucky24 for 15% off your first purchase. All right, let's jump into this 2 impressive wins and 2 impressive performances from John Blackwell. He scores 32 against Iowa, scores 21 against Rutgers, and it was kind of we can dive into all this, but when I was watching the game, as I was watching the game last night, I had Greg Gard's voice in my head because there was a lot of mid-range game from John Blackwell on Monday night, and they do not like mid-range shots. But when you're shooting them the way that he was and the way that he was grooving, take whatever shot you want because it was going in for the most part, especially in the first half.
He's been so dominant here, and it's really everything that this staff saw in the offseason, where he's made the biggest leap out of anybody from last season to this season. You saw it against Iowa when he buried 6 threes and scored 32 points. But that first half in particular against Rutgers, he really kind of took over. And it wasn't just the scoring, which he can do at every level. He's so strong. He can get into the lane, break a guy off the dribble. But he had a great bounce pass that led to a dunk, a couple nice setups for his teammates. And so even if he isn't a so-called true point guard, I think the way that he's developed here with more minutes in that role has been phenomenal. And that's a big reason why Wisconsin is playing as well as it is.
So you talk about all the things that they said in the offseason about him. And the one thing that stands out to me, and this wasn't offseason, this was maybe the beginning of practice or right when they were about to start playing games. And Greg Gard said he's not Johnny Davis, but it feels like he's taken a Johnny Davis leap. The start to the season didn't necessarily show that, I didn't think. But these last few games, especially, and maybe it's the scoring and just doing it in a whole bunch of different ways, and maybe even the mid-range game because, Johnny kind of had that as well. Are we starting to see that Johnny Davis leap? And look, the dude was averaging 15 a game coming into this whole thing. It's not like he was bad, but it just feels like a guy who's taken over games, which maybe we didn't see earlier on. That was more of a John Tonji thing.
It's a natural comparison to make because Johnny was here just a few years ago and went from being a 6th man his freshman year to an All-American his sophomore year. And so you've got Blackwell who came in and had a good freshman season, but he's basically doubled his output from a productivity standpoint, points-wise. They're 2 very different players, but I think in terms of, and one of the things that Greg meant by that was he wanted to make it clear, he's not saying John is going to be an NBA lottery pick, but the confidence level just nothing seems to phase him. And you could see that about Johnny too, but John is so just kind of stoic. And I mean, he's more emotional than like a Chucky Hepburn, obviously, but it just doesn't seem like the lows really get to him in the same way. And I just feel like I think the assist to turnover ratio is part of this too. That is an adjustment, and he's really limited the turnovers, and his assist ratio has gone way up. So he's been great.
So when you talk about his temperament, he is not like a huge celebrator or anything like that, but he does talk like, and that maybe I guess in watching some of this, that has kind of taken a step back as well, a little bit from earlier in the season where maybe he was getting a little emotional because he was getting in guys' heads. And I'm trying to think of who the guy was. Might have been in the Arizona game where Caleb Love was just infuriated by some stuff that John Blackwell was doing and saying, and it cost him. So he's got that part to his game as well. I just think he just feels so smooth right now, and he's always been smooth, but it just feels smooth when he's got the ball in his hands. And there were some plays last night that it was just, NBA like, I guess is what I would say. And it came in a game against a team that has 2 lottery picks. One obviously was battling a bit of a bug still, and the other just did not play well whatsoever in Ace Bailey. And I'll give Wisconsin credit for that. But I thought if we're looking at the guys that are going to perhaps play at the next level, and you look, just take that single game, John Blackwell more than held his own.
And he's only halfway through his sophomore year, so there's so much growth there. His potential just feels like it's through the roof. Ace Bailey was coming off a 39-point game against Indiana and looked like a young player against Wisconsin. They obviously had a plan to defend him very well. He made 3 of 16 from the field. And other than getting an open 3 at the start of the second half, it was a lot of contested shots and some frustration. You saw a double tech with him and Carter Gilmore late in the game. And is it Ron Harper Jr. who was 0 for 2 from I think they said he'd been battling the flu and lost 9 pounds.
He missed the Indiana game, I believe.
So just nowhere near himself. And I think they said in the first half he was scoreless. It was his first scoreless half like ever. Dylan Harper. Just not his typical self.
Yeah. They did. I mean, it feels like they've had a lot of Harpers over the years, but yeah, those are guys that are going to be likely lottery picks, right? They were 2 of the best recruits in this class, and it just feels like they don't have the guys surrounding them that they have in the past that are willing to put in all the other extra oomph to it. Like Rutgers was a very good defensive team. And when they beat Wisconsin, it's usually because of what they do defensively. Wisconsin, I believe, is now, I think I saw the account say they've never lost to Rutgers while scoring more than 65. And obviously that continued last night with them putting up 75. But I thought we can talk more about individuals, but as a team, you get that lead. I mean, you had a 16-point lead. It got down to 3. It was 60-57 with about 6:45 left. And from that point on, Wisconsin went on a 15-6 run to end it. And it's not like they shot great in the second half whatsoever. I thought it was just gutty. I thought it was more of a gutty win than some of the stuff we've seen from Wisconsin this year where it's been maybe offensive flash. They showed that they still have that Wisconsin oomph in it a little bit.
Right. You could say it's the mark of a veteran team, except we've seen veteran Wisconsin teams struggle in certain situations. I think that there's a confidence, it's more of a quiet confidence about this group, because you're right. It was a 3-point game. Rutgers hadn't played particularly well, and it felt like Wisconsin should be up double digits, and yet they're in a spot where it's a 1-possession game. I think you had a couple guys that really in the second half, especially, took over. Stephen Crowl playing the way that he has the last 4 games after getting no rebounds, he ends up with a double-double against Rutgers. And John Tanji didn't do much in the first half, had 2 points, but was able to use his strength and get to the rim and just be a consistent pest. So even if Wisconsin wasn't getting to the free throw line as much as it normally has, 6 attempts the entire game. And for a stretch, you're wondering, is this going to be the first time they don't even attempt a free throw in decades? They managed to gut it out. I think that's a good way to put it, and get to 500 in Big Ten play. And now they're 12-3 overall. And it just feels like they're in a really good spot right now.
I mean, there were plenty of fouls to be called there. Throughout the game, there were plenty of. I mean, it wasn't like Wisconsin wasn't attacking the rim; they certainly were, and it felt a little bit off. Not going to complain about it. Had they lost, probably would have complained about it. But they won while shooting 6 free throws, and I mean they hit all of them. And the difference, it's not the difference of the game, but it's pretty significant. Rutgers went to the line 13 times, and I think they hit 6 of them. They go 6 for 13 from the line. That's obviously rather significant when it comes down to it. So the difference in attempts is one thing, but when you hit the exact same amount, it is what it is. And Wisconsin is going to get to the free throw line a ton. I mean, they came in averaging like 22, 23 a game, and to not get there more than 6, and it took until 3:28 left in the game to get there. Maybe that's just how things are going to happen on the road, but I would be shocked if they have another game where it's 6 or fewer this year. A couple more things from that game. Kamari McGee, right before the end of the first half, where Rutgers was kind of, they were back in the game. They had pushed it down, and him knocking down that shot and then telling the student section or whatever that crowd was right behind him to shh. Just have to love his contributions. And you already mentioned Carter Gilmore, but those two guys that I don't know a ton of people were expecting to have huge impacts on this team certainly played their roles importantly these last couple of games. And really, I should say McGee has throughout. And I know that Carter Gilmore has kind of stepped up into at least an okay 3-point shooter. So the two Wisconsin kids making an impact.
Yeah, McGee, I think, out of everybody who's in the regular playing rotation this season, has been the most pleasant surprise in terms of what he's provided offensively. We knew what he could do defensively from an energy and a hustle standpoint. I think I remember writing in the preseason after watching one of the practices that okay, Greg says he's going to play, or he's the first option as the so-called true point guards from the 3 guys that they had, but that he wasn't necessarily going to give Wisconsin a ton offensively. And I was citing a certain practice that we watched where he didn't score at all. Maybe he only took 1 shot. I don't even know if it was that, but he picks and chooses his spots, doesn't need to be a high volume guy in the minutes that he gets. And it just feels like his shooting stroke is so confident right now. We can get into the Iowa game at some point here, but making 4 threes. And yes, everybody and their mom could have made a 3 from the left corner with nobody within 30 feet, because I think Iowa wasn't sure whether it was supposed to be a zone or man, but like, credit to Kamari for getting those shots. And you go to this Rutgers game, and there were some tough makes that he had. He's just been so smooth and confident, and it's the perfect embodiment of what it means to fulfill your role. You don't have to be a starter, but you can be a major contributor in the minutes that you get, and he's done it in a variety of ways for Wisconsin. He
definitely has. Trying a few more things on the Rutgers thing before we go back to Iowa. I saw this stat. I'll give credit because I love stats like this. But Mike Lucas from the Cap Times, Wisconsin's won their last 32 games when shooting better than 50% from the field. That dates back to 2019. The last time they lost a game when shooting better than 50%, they've lost games while shooting 50%, but nothing while shooting better than 50%. Since 2019, it was an overtime loss to Purdue. They're 44-1 in their last 45 games when shooting 50%, better than 50%. And I had to go all the way back into the archives, like 2017, and it was the Florida game.
Chioza.
Yes, that was one of the games. Like, I mentioned the Purdue game in 2018 or 2019, but the time that happened before that was the Florida game. So yes, they usually when Wisconsin shoots like they did last night, they're going to win, and obviously an impressive performance on the road. A couple more things injury wise. You're a basketball guy, a basketball player. Was that a cheap play on? Was that a cheap? But would you lose your mind if someone did that to you down at the Y? The Max Klesmit going up, whistle's already been made. There was a call somewhere else, and he's shooting the ball, and I think it was Williams that stepped up and then stepped underneath him. Do you have an issue with it?
Am I in the minority that thinking that was not egregious? Like,
yes, I think you are.
Yeah, it's not cool to invade your shooting space. It's hard to adjudicate intent when I'm not inside his head. Like, I don't know if he was it was like a big FU because the play is already dead and Max is about to fire a three. They didn't call it on the floor. Like, they went and looked at it. It's hard for me to know, but obviously the end result makes you go, not cool. Because Max obviously was hobbled the rest of the way. We didn't see him, and they do have a day off today. So knowing what we know about Max, as tough as he is, but you just never know how someone's going to recover from something like that. But I'm not overly up in arms, but I totally understand where people are coming from.
Yeah, I think it was I think if the whistle had not been blown, if it was not a dead ball, and he's just going up to, like, he's going up to contest or a regular shot from Max, I think maybe there's some leeway there. But why are you stepping into that at that point?
That's fair question.
I don't know. I don't understand it. But it also brought back some very, very, I'm sure, bad memories for Wisconsin fans. Completely different situation. And on the other end of the court, but that's where Trey Jackson, when he went up for a shot and came down and broke his foot. And I was like, when you go back and look, it's pretty clearly a pretty badly, twisted ankle. We've all been in Max's spot, right? Not taking a shot and falling on someone's ankle. You have, but like twisting your ankle like that, it hurts like a mother. And so I certainly am hopeful that it's nothing more significant than that, but it could have been, and there's just no reason for it.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's just, it's hard to know, like the natural reaction of like, you don't want someone to get a free look. Sometimes when you see dudes in the NBA just like snatch the ball out of the air. I don't know. Yeah, it's not great, obviously. And I understand why people are upset, and the level of how upset you are will go up if Max has to miss games.
Yeah. I saw some tweets from his family afterwards. They obviously were not pleased. But what are you going to do? I mean, it is what it is. The other injury that popped up was Nolan Winter and his hand. And Greg Gard said afterwards, I should say about Max, Greg did say that he wasn't sure how bad it was. He was in the locker room, shoe was on. So it wasn't like he was in a boot or any, I'm sure he will be, but it's not like he was in a boot or anything like that. So I don't think broken is probably what we're talking about here. This is not I don't think this is a Trey Jackson situation, but Nolan did have like a wrap on his hand. He got cut and they weren't able to stop the bleeding. So that's why, and it was time. Greg said it was time for Steve to come back in anyways. And that's what it is. I don't know. It looked like Nolan was in some pain though. Like when he was on the sideline, he was shaking his hand and like working his wrist, and it just two injuries you can't have because Nolan has been so fantastic. And especially with Steve picking back up, those two guys together, not even playing together, but being together and putting up the numbers that they have has become noteworthy, I think would be a good way to say that. So that's the Rutgers game. Going back to Friday night, did you ever think in your wildest dreams that Wisconsin would be putting up 116 points under Greg Gard at any point?
No.
Okay.
That was
It's
one of the most remarkable displays by a college basketball team, shooting wise, I've ever seen. It looked like the basket was as big as an ocean. And what was so amazing is how quickly it happened, because they had 27 points about 13 minutes and 25 seconds into the game. I think Max buried a three. They had 27 points in the last 6.5 minutes of the half to get to 54. And you'd think 54, you do that again in another half, that's pretty damn good. And they exceeded it. Everybody went off. I mean, Xavier Amos comes in, buries a couple. Obviously, Kamari McGee makes 4. I know Iowa decided that defense was optional. Cam Hunter gets in and makes 1. And it was just, I mean, look, that's historic. That was, you look at the numbers, and it's the second most points ever by a Wisconsin team. First time they've exceeded 100 in a Big Ten game since 1993. Couldn't ask for anything more offensively.
I mean, 21 3-pointers is a Big Ten record. Wisconsin owns the record for most made threes in the game, Jesse. Wisconsin. That, again, is just, I think, just tough to wrap your mind around at times, because there have been how many seasons that have ended, and maybe this one will too. I have no idea. Maybe they'll have a horrible shooting performance, and it'll end the same way that a lot of seasons have, and not just Wisconsin seasons, but seasons across all teams, where you show up and don't have a good offensive performance, and you don't have your defense to rely on, and it turns into a loss. Maybe that's what it'll be, but they'll never be able to take away what happened last Friday night, because that was, it's not just that they put up 116 points. It's that they did it in the situation they were facing. They were 0-2 in Big Ten play. They had not been 0-3 since the mid 1980s. It was the most necessary performance with your back up against the wall. And again, I know it's only 0-2, and if you fall to 0-3, it is what it is. But they need some wins. And I know the losses that they have, Michigan and Illinois and Marquette, are not bad losses whatsoever, and 3 of the better teams that they're going to face this year. But you needed wins. And then to come out and have a performance like that is just absolutely one of the more impressive things I've seen from a Greg Gard team. And maybe I'm just getting hung up on the 116, but it was 116.
It's okay to get hung up on 116. The thing about this matchup is, you knew if you were Wisconsin, you were going to have to score a crap ton of points to beat Iowa, certainly because Iowa, the way they play, we're averaging 85 plus points per game. We're second or third in the country in scoring coming into that game, but also the way Wisconsin plays, and maybe the way they have not consistently played defensively. It was a performance we'll be talking about for a long, long time. I know it was only a regular season game, but there's a reason why you don't see that ever happen. And I think what can make this team special is the ability, not that they're going to make 21, but this has been part of the DNA all season. Certainly 21 increases whatever your average is going to be over the season, but they're averaging 9.5 made threes a game, which is a program record. And obviously the scoring is amazing. I mean, it's the most points they've averaged in a season per game since 1970, 71. I went and looked at that team. John Paulus, by the way, I just want to make sure I get this right. They went 9-15 and 4-10 in the Big Ten that season. So not good at all. But this is really just a historic offensive team. They're number 1 in the country, obviously, in free throw shooting, and they're 34th nationally in scoring offense. I never thought I'd see the day that Wisconsin would be in the top 100, let alone the top 35.
The 3-point shooting, though, is crazy, because we talked about this last week. Like, they're shooting 32%. Is this really, can they really continue to win? They're shooting 35.1% after these last 2 games. They have that ability, but they also have the ability to go cold with it. And when you're shooting that many, if you have an off night, there's a chance that you're going to get beat. But if they're going to, it's not even the 21, but if they're going to hit 10, 11, 12, they're going to win a ton of games. They are. It's crazy that they're averaging more than some of those Michael Finley and Rashard Griffith and Tracy Webster teams, because they put up, you go back and look, a lot of the 100-point games came in that stretch, like that 93, 94 era. And so it's crazy that they're averaging more than that, than those teams, because those guys got up and down.
they're also sharing the ball better than any team since that one, 93-94. It helps when you make shots, but you look and they're averaging 15.7 assists per game, and that 93-94 team averaged 16.3. So we're seeing stuff that we've not seen in a long, long time, obviously.
So the Powell teams were pre-3-pointer too, weren't they?
Oh, yeah. 86, 87 is when it was implemented.
How the hell?
I don't know.
Just not
but
play.
They also gave up basically the same amount that they.
Yeah. Right. Obviously, if you go 9-15, you're probably not winning. You're probably not holding teams to, 50 or 60 a game. But how do you? Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. So they were 4 off the record for the school record of 120 against SMU, I believe, is the all-time record. So it was an insane performance. And this is where I'd like to bring up Fran again. I'm sorry, have you seen him be more mellow than he was in that game? And just this entire year, we haven't heard anything about him whatsoever. And I've seen some people trying to figure out, asking why. And Iowa fans are like, he just does not care anymore. He's leaving after this year. None of his family's here anymore, which is true. I mean, his son is down at Butler, right? And the other son, I believe, is not coming to Iowa either. I just don't know. I maybe he's just grown up. He wasn't growing up at 55, but he is at 65. I don't know.
I don't have a good answer for that, but at least I was entertaining, scoring points. I mean, I don't know.
So much more entertaining when he's not keeping it cool. I mean, I thought it was a boring performance from Fran McCaffery on Friday. I just your team gives up 116 points. They're barely putting what appears to be barely any effort on defense, and just mistakes all over the place. And he's just, okay, whatever. Do you think they make the tournament? It's tough. This Big Ten's just insane. There's going to be there's probably going to be a 10, 11, maybe 12 that make it.
There's so many good teams. I was looking, I think Wisconsin in the net rankings is up to 25, and there's 6 teams ahead of them in the Big Ten. Then again, when you have 18, you don't even have to be particularly good to get to the tournament if you can finish above 500 in a league like that.
Well, again, I thought Wisconsin needed to get to 20, and that's why I thought Friday was so important, because you have struggled at times going to Rutgers, and so you fall to 0-3, and then you're looking at 0-4 going to Rutgers. So I thought that's why Friday was so important. Then to get out of there with going 2-2 is really good for your future prospects. Obviously, not just getting to the tournament, but perhaps maybe. Again, we're prisoner of the moment here, just because the way they've played the last couple of games. Maybe keeping yourself in the conversation for a title in the conference, and I know that is that's become even more difficult with another 4 teams in this whole thing, and obviously a very, very good one, or I should say a pretty good one in UCLA. I mean, they obviously went to Nebraska and lost, but it's a much more difficult Big Ten than it has been even in the past. But there's no great team, and that's what kind of like we've seen Purdue, and there's no great team that's going to, you believe, is just going to run away with it. I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't know what wins it. What do you think? 15-5?
5, yeah. Something like that, because there's always this beating each other up type situation when you don't have a dominant team who's going to go 18-2. The good news for Wisconsin is they don't have any bad losses. They're 10-0 against the so-called the quad 2, 3, 4 teams. And yeah, they're only 2-3 right now against quad 1 opponents. We've talked about the 3 losses previously. Those are real tough teams. So they haven't necessarily hurt themselves, and they're going to have a ton more opportunities to pick up those type of wins. So, 12-3, 15 games in, pretty good spot.
It's an amazing spot for what we knew of this team coming in.
Oh yeah.
And what the expectations, we had no idea that this was something that could be potentially happening. And yes. All right, let's jump into some listener questions. We'll start with Butterbilt. For a few games, I thought the question must be asked if the headband had been holding Carter Gilmore back for the bulk of his career. Now he's brought it back and continues to play well. Has he improved so much that he has transcended the limitations of the headband? And I will throw this at you here, Jesse. He had hit 9 3-pointers in his first 3 years combined. He is 7 for 19 from 3 this year, which quite honestly makes a whole lot more sense than him hitting 9 shots in the first 3 years, because he was a scorer in high school.
He was, at Arrowhead.
Dude averaged like 25 a game.
So we're saying that we're saying the headband, we're crediting the headband for the 3-point shooting is where we're at.
Well, I just can we just say that it wasn't the thing holding him back?
We can say that. Yeah, we can say that. I mean, I think, yes, he's taken a lot of heat. Obviously, Greg has discussed that too. And it's a player who's comfortable with what his role is. And I know that that's a cliched thing, but when you're a role player and you're a bench guy and you know you're only going to get a certain amount of minutes, you've got to understand what the expectations are for you. And if he gets open for 3, you feel pretty good about it. Hit a couple, obviously, against Iowa. I think he had another one against Rutgers. And so you're not asking him to go get you 10 points, 8 rebounds, but make the open shot, get some putbacks, set screens, play good defense. And he's been exactly what they've needed for that role.
Yeah. I think people can deal with a whole lot of things when it comes to Carter, because Greg will always tell you that if you watch basketball, you know what he gives to the team. But it was always like, okay, but teams don't have to guard him. And that was especially outside. And now that's kind of not being the case, at least to this point this year. 7 of 19. It's not a huge, number of shots, but it's, for him it is. Because I think you go back and look at his career, the most 3-pointers he's taken in the season were 26, and he's already got 19, and we're only, I guess we're closing in on 2/3 of the way. I guess we're closing in on we're about the halfway point here. So that has been good. I guess we should mention the turnovers against Rutgers. Wisconsin doesn't usually win games, haven't won games in the past when they've turned the ball over 16 times. So I think that's another thing that they were able to overcome, even being on the road. Those turnovers and the lack of free throws, and you still win by double digits. Again, impressive aspects. And I know John Blackwell had 5 of those, but he had a good game. He was fine the other way. I mean, it was fine. It was fine.
He had a good stretch. He had a good 3-game stretch before that, though. So I think I was
without turnovers. Yeah. Yep. And so this was actually another part of this question. I guess I shouldn't have threw that out there. Who was the last player to make as dramatic of improvement to his 3-point shooting as Carter Gilmore has made? It went from open for a reason to respectable shooter. Someone brought up, which I will give credit. Well, that's a weird name, but Jabba French, I believe is the Twitter. Zach Showalter, 4 of 24 in his first 2 years at Wisconsin, then hit 35% and then 40%. Wasn't like a huge usage guy those first couple of years, which I guess would be the same for Carter, and he still hasn't been. And Shoei was a starter his last 2 years, but improvement as a 3-point shooter, I think you could certainly say that about Zach, because that was not something coming out of high school. He was just a ridiculous athlete. His brother was the shooter, but he worked on a shot and turned it into a weapon.
Shout out to the in-state guys for the long-term development that you rarely see anymore in college basketball. Was Shoei the one who was this the state championship game? He had like a dunk 2 seconds into the game or something like that. And you're like, oh crap.
It is the most ridiculous start to a game I've ever seen. Madison Memorial was way up here. They were fantastic. They had obviously so many guys that came through that program. And Germantown was obviously very good as well. But yes, they won the tip, and it knocked it off to Zach, and he went down and just stuffed it right on top of some guy's head. And the place is just, holy, yeah, he was. I honestly, like, anytime I have talked to him, like for a podcast or anything, that's like the first thing I almost always ask about, just because I think it's just the most amazing thing ever. And he did some other amazing things in his career at Wisconsin. He had one of which would have been the most legendary things of all time if they had won that Florida game. It's still pretty legendary, the belt and everything. Still pretty legendary. Would have been even more legendary had they been able to win that game. But yes, that is you're remembering that correctly. Ryan asks, are the last 4 games the most consistent stretch of Big Steve's career? Can he keep it up? And what did Guard say to him? I think Guard said, hey, 0 rebounds? Really? That's what – really? No. The best Steve is an aggressive Steve, I believe is what Greg said after the game last night. And I agree.
I mean, he's gone 18 points, 15 points, 14, and then 18 points with 10 rebounds against Rutgers. Is it the best 4-game stretch? I'm sure there are some better ones because he's been starting for a long, long time. But given that he was coming off a 0 rebound game and he should be at a much higher level than that, this is a really important bounce back for him. And Greg talked about it after the Rutgers game. Obviously, he's always been a big fan of Steve and has felt like when you play aggressive and you want the offense to go through you, it makes a huge difference. Certainly. He can step out. You saw, hit some clutch 3-point shots. I thought a really big sequence was when Rutgers cut it to 3 points there in the second half. Blackwell airballed a mid-range jumper, and Steven is right there, and he puts it back for a dunk. Just that presence to be around the basket and be confident makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I mean, he's had some stretches where he was in double-digit points wise for extended periods. But you like in Big Ten play, like this is up there. And I know only 2 of the games were Big Ten games, right? But I'm trying to think, going back to early 2023, he had 17 against Minnesota, 20 against Illinois, and 19 against Michigan State. But Wisconsin only won one of those games. What he's done has come in wins. I mean, they've won 4 straight. So I'm sure if we went back and went game by game and season by season, we'd find other stretches of impressive play. Yet, because of what had happened or what we hadn't seen from him to this point in the season, it makes it, I think, stand out maybe even a little bit more. Rutgers, this from SK, Rutgers took 16 more shots and 7 more free throws, and UW didn't get to the line until the final media timeout, and Rutgers still never led and still got housed, even with a 7+ point Zebra home assist. I don't know that's a question. I think it's just more of a statement that it's tough to disagree with.
Yeah.
I mean, again, that place is not easy. I think they've sold it out like 40, 50, I don't know. It was like 40 straight times. It's got 8,000 people. It's not exactly the most impressive sellout that you're ever going to find. But for whatever reason, Wisconsin has struggled there. They were 2-4, I think, going against Rutgers in that building since they came into the league. It's not an easy place to play for whatever reason. But usually that team that's playing there is better.
Yeah, it says a lot about what Wisconsin was able to do. I know Rutgers hasn't been great this season and didn't play a particularly good game, but you've got first-round NBA draft picks. You've got the crowd behind you when there's a lot of momentum and they're making a run. It's a one-possession game. And so Wisconsin was able to stave off all of it, even if things weren't going their way, even if there were injuries. Greg says all the time that you've got to get old and stay old. And even if it's a different type of roster, that stuff matters down the stretch.
I think that saying is going to get used quite a bit. I heard it quite a bit last night, and now you're using it. So, yeah, I don't hate it. It's accurate. It's just get old to stay old. Get old and stay old. Luke says, best player on the team, Blackwell or John Tanji?
Ooh, man. Have to really weigh the pros and cons here like it's a boxing match. Tanji obviously leads the team in scoring. He's shooting 95% from the free throw line. He's had 41 and 33-point games. I'm inclined to say, I guess I might go Blackwell, though, just because of everything else that he's been able to do. And maybe some of it has to do with being able to watch someone over the course of their career, because Tanji just got here, but the leap that Blackwell has made from freshman to sophomore year and the position that he's been placed in to have to be the point guard, I think that they're playing the way they are because of him and his aggressiveness. And that's not to take anything away from what Tanji's done. He's 5th in the Big Ten in scoring, 18.5 points per game. He's been exceptional. But since I can only pick one, I'm going to say Blackwell.
I would agree. I just think he's a better all-around player, all that he brings to the table. And John Tanji, scoring-wise, especially to start the year, was at a different level. But Blackwell's kind of caught him there a little bit. So I think just all around, he would have to be it. Nuclear Badger asks, the Badgers are more efficient with one of Crowl or Winter on the floor than they are with both. Any chance guard changes the starting lineup to further stagger their minutes?
I don't see that happening. I think if you're playing as well as they are, I don't know why you would make a change in the middle of the season. And I understand maybe some of it can be matchup based, but I also think that's a real tough cover to have to deal with 2 7-footers. And they're both playing well. That's the other thing. If they were not playing well and you weren't winning, it would make sense to shake it up. But in Winter here, this little last stretch here has been outstanding. And we just touched on what Steven's been able to do the last 4 games. So I'm kind of why mess with a good thing generally.
Well, I think it was noteworthy, when Greg talked about after the game and he was asked about Steven, and he was talking about staggering his substitution pattern changes a little bit to give him more of a break. And also, they certainly can play together, but I think numbers wise, and it's matchup based, but playing them separately allows, because they're both have been so productive that it's like you never have to take one of them off the floor. Like you have a 7-footer on the floor all the time that's being productive when you do stagger their minutes a little bit. But it feels like the substitution patterns that Greg has worked on with Steve have been a huge boon to his season. And so I feel like maybe that will continue. And until it stops working. And right now it's certainly working. I get where people are coming from, though. We always want to see the 2 7-footers play together because it just makes sense, but it also makes sense, the ability to spread things out and just make them even more dangerous when they never have to have a guy off the floor that can produce like both of them have produced of late. I mean, both of them I know the Illinois game was not Steve's best, but the last 4 have been really good. And Nolan going back to just before the Illinois game has really produced until last night with the injury. So, all right, a couple here from Blue Sky. What was and you've done stories on this, I believe. What was the catalyst for Greg Gard to open up the offense? Assistant coaches, transfer portal, players, talent, administration, and boosters, whatever the reason, the better for us.
Well, I think it's been a multi-pronged effort here. First of all, the staff. I mean, you can't ignore that. Him bringing in Kirk Penny, can't overstate the importance of that with Kirk's experience. And I know that he's not technically the offensive coordinator, but I know that some of the guys last year when I did a story on Kirk referred to him in that way. The structure of the offense is different because Kirk is here. And I would also say because Greg has given his assistants the freedom to do some different things, because Greg has confidence not only in himself, but in delegating authority. Kirk, we saw, he's a Hall of Fame basketball player overseas, and he played for some really good teams. And I remember talking to him, and he said that part of what they implemented offensively was some of the things that they did when he was at Maccabi Tel Aviv, which was one of the great basketball teams in Israel and certainly in that part of the country. And so they instituted this, they call it a ball screen continuity offense. So I know our show is called The Swing. We've talked about this many times before. It's not what they run, but a lot of it has to do with setting screens for the guards, in the middle of the court and allowing them to work and play off each other. And they did this for a large stretch last year too, when AJ Storr was here, and then obviously fizzled in January, but they've clearly taken it to another level this season with a full off season for Kirk to be here and put that stuff in. So there's that. I think it's Greg understanding, and he's talked about this, how different college basketball is from 10 years ago. His ability to adapt to changes, I think we've talked about it before, but that's a big part of this because so many coaches can just be stuck in their ways. He said, we're not the days of winning a game 50-48. Those are over with. You have to be able to score points. And so it's offensive changes. It's an approach and philosophy. It's understanding what matters from an analytical standpoint. He obviously presents that information to the players and doesn't want to overload them, but wants them to understand here's why we're trying to get shots at the rim and 3-pointers and not mid-range shots and get to the free throw line. And the other piece is the players. Obviously, you have to go and get people out of the portal every year. And John Tanji is an absolute home run. You couldn't have asked for more getting the portal guy. And I know Xavier Amos has been a bit player and we haven't seen much of Cam Hunter, but even hitting on one of those to add into the pieces that you already had, all of that together is why Wisconsin is where it is, in my opinion.
Another part of this question, because of the style of that they play, is there a glaring weakness offensively or for Wisconsin that and the type of team that could potentially cause them problems?
Well, they still obviously maintain their defensive principles, but I think the Rutgers game is a good example of what they're capable of doing. Is that going to be consistent? And then
is that a result of the offense, though?
Well, in part, they're scoring more points. I'd have to look at the tempo numbers to see how different it is now. Like, are the number of possessions per game so much higher now? I don't know the answer to that, but
yeah,
I also think offensively, the things they've been relying on have to continue. So look, if you're going to take 27 threes a game, and we talked before, they're making about 9.5 on average, that's a program record. What happens if you go 3 for 30? Or what happens if you don't make 85% of your free throws where you're leading the country? And now you can say that about any team. If the things you do well, you don't do well in the NCAA tournament. But I don't look at this team and say necessarily that there is a glaring weakness that can't be overcome, at least right now.
Okay. All right. Last one, and we'll go. Is there a level of teams tier-wise above Wisconsin in the Big Ten? So, like,
yes, I think so.
Okay, all right.
I mean, Illinois and Michigan have already beaten them. So there's
right,
that.
So Michigan State is unbeaten in the conference. Michigan's unbeaten in the conference. Then you've got Illinois, who beat them at 3-1, and Indiana and Purdue is also already at 3-1. So, but like UCLA and Oregon are both ranked. Do you think they're a tier ahead of Wisconsin?
Too early to say. The good news is they get to play them. I don't think, at worst, if you wanted to tier this out, I feel like Wisconsin is a tier 2 Big Ten team with the potential to be tier 1. Because like you said, there is not a single great team. It's just that there are so many very good teams in the league that's part of what makes it tough. But you look at, I know we're way early on this, but like bracketology, NCAA tournament potential seedings, I see them as like a 6-7 seed at this point. And there's ample opportunity to move up. So I think they're every bit in the mix with those best teams in the Big Ten. But right now, I'd say there are a couple teams you'd put ahead of Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Because Wisconsin was 11th in the country and they were 8-0. I mean,
no. I know. I was more laughing at what I saw from Minnesota last night.
Yes.
You
mean fouling up too?
Oh, the dude was a 91% free throw shooter and he missed both. And then the guy went and fouled him. They're playing Ohio State. They're up 2. There's no need to foul. I mean, yeah, there's no need. They're not. If they're going to take a 3, they're going to take a 3. But if I don't think Ohio State was going to take a 3. They were trying to get to the rim. There were still 4 seconds. What were there left? 4 seconds left. Yeah, I think there were 4. I think there were 4 seconds left. Just horrendous from Minnesota. And so when we talk about tiers and which teams are the worst and who's at the bottom and all that good stuff, Minnesota's definitely at the bottom. They are 0-4. They gave Ohio State a hell of a game at home, or I should say a hell of a game, and needed to win that game because where they're at. They come to Madison on Friday off of that one. That's a tough week, man. That's a tough week to lose on a Monday and the way that you lose in double overtime, and then have to wait all week, and then you get to come to Wisconsin, which is playing some good basketball of late. Not ideal for the boys from Minneapolis, but we'll be back to talk about that one. And then obviously Wisconsin also has a game with Ohio State next Tuesday. So we'll probably be back about this time next week, talk about what we see from those two games, and keep on rolling here through January. Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Swing.